Hello and welcome back to my channel, where today I have a double review for you for two recent releases, The Black Phone and Minions: The Rise of Gru. Two very similar films that deserve to be talked about in the same sentence. First up is The Black Phone. This is a new Blumhouse film that's directed by Scott Derrickson, who reteams with Ethan Hawke and tells the story of a young boy who's abducted by a person known as the Grabber, and through unexplained superpowers, some sort of psychic abilities or ability to talk to the dead, and those potential abilities are partly what makes the film so frustrating, because the film leaves a gaping hole in its wake, unmotivated in the explanation of an intriguing premise, and afraid to address the film's clear thematic center. This movie feels like it was made or written at the time that the movie takes place, back in the late 70s, early 80s, around the time that Stephen King was really dominant as a force of literature in the horror world, and you can definitely sense King's influences. But I think King was always, the things we talk about him sometimes is that he was almost too unafraid to talk about certain things about childhood and growing up, where this story feels at odds with some of its thematic ideas. There seems to be something going on with the Grabber and maybe a connection to being gay or something. It feels very Buffalo Bill in that regard. And then Derrickson maybe knowing that it could be harmful to put this out, especially during Pride Month, and then he just tones it back. But then there just seems to be a gaping hole in the middle. The main character is also referenced similarly to how Will Byers used to be referenced in earlier seasons of Stranger Things. Like, they call him names, they call him an F slur, I believe. And so it seems as if maybe there's a whole underlying plot about living as a child or trying to discover your sexuality in this time, and then the Grabber being kind of this perverted version of that. But the movie doesn't address it, so it's these incomplete arcs. I'm just sitting there questioning, why go down these paths? Why set up all these things if you're not going to pay them off in any way? Is Derrickson just afraid of hitting any of these beats because he's afraid that maybe it is too traditionalist and it's not where we are now as a society in terms of any sort of LGBT stories? It just seems that there's a whole chunk of this movie that is missing, and because it's missing, this thing doesn't really hit you thematically when it reaches its endpoint. And I would let that go if the premise of the plot was any way interesting. But they kind of just do the J.J. Abrams thing where they pose a lot of questions and then don't really give you answers. The only thing I found compelling in this was newcomer Mason Thames' lead performance. He really grounds the picture with a lot of confidence. But that's the only place I find that sort of integrity or awareness of what this story could be. It's not really in the script and it's not in the direction. There's one cool visual they do whenever Mason Thames' character is talking on the phone, and you see the person who's talking, but you hear how it sounds in the phone. That was a cool visual. And they do it a couple of times, which you can definitely tell that they knew it was a cool visual. Again, Derrickson is employing this idea that he hopes the audience thinks that this is an Inception top thing, where he's going to leave it for the audience to decide, and the audience can do all the work to see what these theories were and what these powers meant. You don't feel motivated to answer them because you don't feel that the filmmakers have done the adequate work. It's also tonally ambivalent and at points contradictory. There's moments of comedy that were funny. There's a moment when the younger sister character just opens her dollhouse, says Jesus, and starts cursing, which is funny, and I'll remember the line, of course, but it kind of undercuts the scene that we just left. The whole movie doesn't really flow. There's not any semblance of why one scene ends and the next begins. Ethan Hawke is fine, but he definitely still feels like he's working out the kinks to his character. It doesn't feel like it's a fully formed idea. There's a movie in here somewhere, but there's nothing really compelling enough, save for Mason Thames' performance, that's making me want to redial into this movie anytime soon. Moving on to a very different movie, let's talk about Minions: The Rise of Gru. This is the 5th movie in the Despicable Me franchise, after 3 Despicable Me's and the first Minions movie, which came out 7 years ago. And this movie takes place 11 years after the first Minions. I mean, the first Minions was set in the 60s, and this is set in 1976. Gru hasn't aged since then. The movie specifically says he's 11 and 3/4, so the timeline doesn't really make any sense, and nothing really does make sense in a Minions movie. And I guess I was just stupid enough to think there would be some sense of internal logic in Minions. you can laugh at me now for thinking that. The film just acts as a loud babysitting service for small children who don't know how low their parents think of them, feeling like a random collection of Minion shorts that are just long enough to fill the feature-length runtime when smushed together, similar to how those direct-to-DVD Disney movies would go, and those direct-to-DVD sequels. I mean, I could talk about the fact that who's really the main character? Is it the Minions or is it Gru? The movie doesn't really decide, but it's Minions. It doesn't deserve this amount of intellectual criticism, really, because I don't think they even care anymore. I mean, the main director for all the Despicable Me movies, who also voices the Minions, Pierre Coffin, he's not even directing this time. I think he senses that this shtick is getting tired, but they're still going to try and just put enough just bare bones ideas they can, whatever they can do, down to the let's just do our own version of Avengers with Minions Assemble.
Minions Assemble!
Like, they're just wringing every single cent they can and just throwing gibberish on the screen and making you think, oh, this is enough to entertain your kids. With a never-ceasing 70s soundtrack that would make James Gunn salivate, the time period is really the only thing that makes this film discernible from any of the other Despicable Me movies. And listen, I was a kid when the first one came out. I remember going to the first one when I was 8 years old. The second one was the first movie I saw 5 times in theaters, and I saw twice in one day in theaters. So I do have some nostalgic feelings for these movies, but I just feel that they're not trying anymore. And what's hard about this movie is I do feel that if they did try, this could be just a fun, stupid summer blockbuster that you go in and just have a good time with. And inadvertently or not, there are some genuine laughs in this movie. There's an early scene where a kid tells his teacher that he wants to be a teacher when he grows up, and she says, no, you do not. Or a part when all the Minions are sad and it's raining and you find out that a Minion was just putting a sprinkler over them. There's some fun gags, some funny bits that did get me to genuinely laugh. So it's just more frustrating when you see them go for such an easy joke or go for something that is just so played out that it's not even funny anymore. That enthusiasm for possible greatness is largely outweighed by the guaranteed desire for success. Play for the lowest common denominator because that's what will fill the seats. And unfortunately, Minions: The Rise of Gru is just another example of a tedious blockbuster that thinks the lowest of its audience and just plays into the target demographic that will ensure them more success instead of giving us something that is actually worth the time and money that people have spent on it. So that is as seriously as anybody is ever going to take Minions: The Rise of Gru. I'm sure I'll be talking about the next 7 Despicable Me and Minions movies as these summers continue to drone on and on and on. Please let me know what you thought of the Black Phone or Minions. Let me know if you saw these movies, what you thought of them in the comments below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to not miss any new videos from Spoilers Ahead with Anthony Post. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you at the movies.